Welcome to the second meeting, second staff meeting focused on professional wellbeing. In our first meeting, we covered thinking through the challenges of the times during this COVID-19 period. We also worked together on the descriptors of a professional wellbeing wheel, and you as a staff developed your own descriptors. That's really important that you shape that yourselves. It's unique to you as a group of people and your school. And then we went on to audit our own individual well-being and to look at whether there were any common areas across your team, whether there were any common areas of strength and areas of weakness. So this second meeting is very much focused on key actions. Having identified those areas, it's really important to commit to planning some key actions. And I want to be able to share with you some ideas that absolutely starter for 10 ideas, and you'll be able to add to them, and I'm sure suggest much better than me. And equally share a framework for continued discussions. It is important that you continue to discuss your professional wellbeing with colleagues, with peers, with family, with line managers. And I think it's helpful sometimes to have a framework for those discussions. So bear with me again while I sort out sharing the screen and we can move together to that first start. There we go. Don't you just love it? Okay, staff meeting 2. Before we go any further, these are the materials you will need. We can pause for a moment to make sure you've all got those. You should have 2 handouts. One is key actions for teachers, and the other one is a balance framework for peer discussions. So if you haven't quite grabbed those, do that now, and if you want to pause the video, that's fine. Okay, moving on. This is what we want to try and do then. We want to come back to those key areas that you identified for improvement that are common across your school. We want to have some time to plan key actions and to look at a framework for further discussions. You can't just leave it there. And it's the sort of focus where it needs a regular review and regular discussions. I have an analogy in all of this, and we'll come to it, of Slimming World. Slimming World allows for a commitment, regular reviews, talking with friends, setting targets. Professional wellbeing is just the same in terms of commitment issues, and it's hard to commit to. So I want to spend some time looking at that. And finally, I hope that your head teachers will be able to outline the further support that will be available to you. And one of the areas this year I think all schools should consider very seriously is having professional wellbeing targets as part of your appraisal or performance management. So that's what we aim to do. You will have, as a staff, identified those strengths and areas for development, and I'll let your head teacher actually lead this element where you'll revisit the findings from the first staff meeting, your common areas, and just make sure you've agreed a few key priorities. And then you'll go on to consider the starter ideas for key actions. If you want to pause at this point to just remind yourselves of those common patterns, the few key priorities, 1 or 2 at most, don't take more than that, and I'll take you into the handout around starter ideas for key actions. So this is that handout. What I've tried to do here is for each descriptor in the wheel, I've just put some, as I say, starter ideas. If you look at, for example, staying positive for the children and modelling optimism, there's some key actions there, really simple key actions, but they will make a difference. If you check your expression regularly, are you actually slumped? Are you leant over? Are you holding your head up? Are you smiling? Are you listening? Your children will take their cues from you. But it's amazing how when you try to adopt that stance, you and yourself feel more positive. When you push yourself to smile, you actually feel better than you might feel inside initially. There's something about a class gratitude journal, and if you do it for your class, you're more likely to do it for yourself. Actually having something regularly where you reflect on what's going well, where you reflect on what's positive, it's really good focus for the children, but it's a really good focus for you at the beginning or end of every day. And that point, before your children go home, list the positives from the day with your class. Let them leave on a positive, but do the same for yourself. So that's just going through one of the descriptors. There are a number there. They are really just starter ideas, and I know that you will come up with a whole range of better ideas than those, but I hope they're a start of a 10. So the activity is, for each of the specific priorities for your school that you've identified, have a look at those key actions and add some further ideas. And your head teacher will pull the ideas together and agree with you a set of key actions for you to commit to. So pause the video there to complete that task. I referred earlier to the Slimming World analogy. Commitment to a contract is central to that operation, to that business. And committing to protecting your well-being is like committing to losing weight. It's really hard. And a contract helps that commitment. So what I'm advocating is, if you have, as a staff now, identified some key priorities for you all to protect your well-being, and you've looked at some definite key actions that you could all take, you have to make a commitment to it. You may want to make a contract to yourself. It may be very similar to the sort of contract where you go along to Slimming World and you make a contract that you're going to lose a stone before Christmas. What they do in Slimming World is they have a structure around that. They have a contract, they have regular reviews and check-ins, they set short-term targets, they talk through struggles, and they share successes. And that same analogy, or that analogy, applies to protecting your professional well-being. This staff meeting is a start. You need to make a commitment to those key actions, how you're going to regularly review them. Are you going to set some short-term targets around exercise, around being positive, around taking time to reflect on the day? Just really short-term next steps. And expect to not always get it right. Don't beat yourself up if you don't commit to it every day. Talk through those struggles with friends, with colleagues, with people at home, but share the successes as well, that you are managing to do something like a daily burst of fresh air, a daily burst of exercise. Actually congratulate yourself. I've done a lot of work over the last few years in developing frameworks for coaching and for discussions. And I think it's helpful to have a framework when you have discussions with colleagues about your professional well-being. And they are frameworks that are as useful in a peer discussion as they are in more formalized coaching. This is the framework that I've developed particularly around these times, and it's your handout as part of the session. And what I try to do when I'm having discussions, both with colleagues, with peers, but also in formal work in wellbeing coaching, is I share this framework. People know exactly where we're going. The discussion is not going to go off in dangerous places. It's going to follow this model of a balance down the left-hand side. And if I just take you through that as a framework that you may well want to use in your school, in both peer discussions and coaching. First of all, actually acknowledging the challenging times and the efforts that you've already made. We as teachers always move on to the next thing we're going to do. We don't acknowledge all the things we've already done. What have you already done around getting your classroom, your bubble ready? What have you already done in terms of developing new ways of working in home learning? What have you already done where you've worked with your families much more than ever before? The B, but tell me your reality, allowing colleagues to just say, what's it feel like for you? What's it feel like on a day-to-day basis? Before you start talking about aims, what the aims are in professional well-being. There's something about your lessons learned from when you've tried to focus on things before. The lessons learned when you did that well-being wheel. What is it that you individually are perhaps not focusing on? And what have you learned about yourself in the past in terms of trying to commit to those things, trying to have that balance in your well-being, your professional well-being? And the balance between the expectations of your professional role, which is a given, you know, the teacher standards are there, it's a given. But how you balance that with your professional well-being is so critical at this time. So talking through how those actions and strategies are going, what are the key things that you're doing, what are you really focusing on, maybe even breaking those down into smaller steps. And I talked about the commitment model, but there is equally evidence around if you communicate to somebody outside of your immediate context, perhaps senior colleagues, perhaps peers, perhaps your family, perhaps friends, that you are going to do something, you are more likely to do it. You will feel that you are more accountable to do it. So communicating one particular thing that you're going to do, if you're going to set up the Daily Mile for your children, if you're going to set up a morning meditation session to reflect and stand back, then communicate it to people, because they will then expect you to do it and they'll ask you how it's going. And that helps with accountability. And this is something that people do in the corporate world, and we really don't do enough of in education. And this is expecting to be successful. Visualizing your success, visualizing yourself really feeling balanced in your professional life, that you're protecting yourself, that things are going well as they can be, but you are feeling calm and positive about it. And plan for ways to celebrate that. Plan for ways to be positive about that. So I'll stop there and let you spend some time just talking through that framework and how you might use it in discussions in your school. So finally, what can you do when you've gone through those key actions, you've planned some key actions, you've got a framework for discussions? Do make a formal plan now. When are you going to talk to colleagues about this? When are you going to review? When are you going to talk to team managers? When are you going to put this on the agenda of a key stage meeting or a phase meeting? Are you going to think about actually focusing on well-being in performance management discussions this year? And how are you going to plan to use those well-being wheels twice a year? Because I guarantee if you focus on one or two of these and you commit to regular reviews, regular discussions about it, you will see a measurable improvement. When you do that well-being wheel in 3 or 4 months' time, you will be in a different place. And that's a very positive thing to think about the future. So if you want to pause the video at this point to just make those plans, to maybe make some dates, to agree a focus in terms of when you're going to review and whether you want to include these within wellbeing targets, pause the video now. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the second staff meeting. I hope that by the end of this meeting, you feel you've got a concrete way forward. You feel you've got some key actions that you can follow. You can feel collectively as a staff, these are 1 or 2 areas that you are going to focus on, that you are going to protect your well-being, and you're going to protect one another. And the way you're going to protect one another is to have those discussions, to regularly have those discussions. It's a very healthy focus, and I hope that framework is helpful for those discussions. So I wish you all the best. during these challenging times. And I would love to hear from schools in terms of how you're making progress. My email is sally.rundle@hotmail.co.uk, and genuinely I would love to hear from you of how it's going, and I look forward to seeing some of you again when we move forward on further training. Thank you very much for listening and for engaging, and take care and stay safe.